Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes a pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's fact. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 199, one away from 200 episodic weekly episode of the Last Round Podcast. We appreciate you listening. If it's your first time listening, or if you've been here since the beginning or came in the middle, we definitely appreciate it. Let's jump right back into it. Fight reviews this past Saturday, the 29th of October, from the Wembley Arena in London, England on DAZN. Katie Taylor remains undefeated at 22-0 with the 10-round unanimous decision win over Taylor-Carbajal. Katie Taylor obviously retains her undisputed lightweight world titles. Katie Taylor, obviously she's undefeated, but has a lot of momentum right now, especially coming off of the big Serrano fight with the big Serrano victory against Amanda Serrano in New York City. Before we talk about what's ahead for Katie Taylor, Mike, what did you think about her performance this past weekend?
I thought it was a good performance, from Katie. I think she is, looks like she has lost her step a little bit. She stays in the pocket a little bit more than she used to, kind of gets involved in the scrappier sides of boxing. But, she got the unanimous decision victory in the end on the night. And I think now, she's 36 years old. They keep talking about, a big kind of farewell fight at Croke Park. And I think, all signs are hopefully pointing towards Serrano. We get that rematch that I think we want and I think women's boxing deserves. And then after that, I think she deserves some big paydays. I think maybe some crossover fights between like Cyborg and maybe even like Holly Holm are probably what we're going to see, because there's not many names, in and around that division, unless, a fight that's coming up soon, Chantel Cameron and Jessica McCaskill, which is at the weight division above. We can maybe see, Katie Taylor step up and, try to achieve a little bit more greatness in one of her last ever fights. And doing something like that, which would probably make sense, especially if, Chantel Cameron wins it, because, her and, Jessica McCaskill have already fought, and, Katie Taylor got the best of her that time around. So maybe a new opponent, an all British opponent, all the, Irish and English fight. That would be great if, Chantal manages to get the victory in that one. But I do think we've seen, the best of Katie Taylor, and I think she's on a little bit of a slope now. And hopefully we just get some, big fights for her to sail off into the sunset, and look at all the stuff she's achieved so far in amateur boxing and professional boxing. A lot of the ladies, I think, like her and, Clarissa Shields a lot for what they've done for female fighting over the last, 4 or 5 years.
Staying on that topic, actually, you made me think about it. I guess we're not essentially insulting one or the other or discrediting one or the other, but who, from a global perspective, can you give more credit to for empowering and elevating female boxing? Katie Taylor or Clarissa Shields? Because obviously they've impacted it. Or Jake Paul.
That's a hard question. Katie Taylor put substantially more eyes on the TV and
but in the UK,
more bums in seats than Clarissa Shields does. If just in general, I think if you put
right, yeah. If you just compare it, like that,
you just compare numbers. But Clarissa Shields does have, that documentary that was on Netflix. I don't think the Katie Taylor documentary was on Netflix. Clarissa Shields maybe got more eyes due to the fact of, what she did in the Olympics. Being a 2-time gold medalist, where, Katie Taylor was, I believe, just one time, and then, the second time round she didn't win it, and then turned professional after that, if I remember correctly. That is a good question. That is a good question to see. Katie Taylor, maybe just due to the fact of all the Irish people that are around the world, and the fact that she could probably fight me or you, Daniel, at Croke Park, and it would probably sell out 80, 85,000, 90,000 tickets, whereas Carissa Shields doesn't sell anywhere near that. So in terms of just bums on seats, I think Katie Taylor, the impact around the world, that's kind of hard to judge. But I think regardless of who's done the most, they've both done a hell of a lot. It's probably Carissa Shields substantially more stateside. And luckily we've got Katie Taylor, over in the UK, which does it as well. And hopefully together, the impact that they've made, just globally has done, wonders for female boxing. And hopefully we have someone else that can do even more. Hopefully there's another Brit that can take the baton from Katie Taylor when she retires, and maybe even bring more people to the sport. That's something we've got to hope, right? Hopefully we don't stagnate. Hopefully we keep going and end up like female UFC fighting.
Going back to the actual fight between her and Carbajal this past weekend, I agree that Taylor is on a decline, just like we've talked about in several episodes over the years. Father Time is undefeated, or would you call it Mother Time in this instance? 36 years old. She's undefeated. She's been doing this a long time. She wants to fight in Croke Park. I think her and Eddie Hearn in Matchroom ideally hope that fight at that location can be made with Amanda Serrano in a rematch. Would you favor Katie Taylor? Because the first fight was still close. It was close. It was a good fight. Great atmosphere. Definitely helped a lot with female boxing. But would you still favor Katie Taylor? Let's just say they fight next summer, give or take. Maybe next spring, her and Amanda Serrano. Would you still favor her? Or would you give the edge to Serrano?
Going off that first performance, you'd hope that she'd go away and, if it's going to be maybe, like her last fight, maybe that she just, with how close the first fight was, that gives her that little bit of an edge. Because I think some of the times, some of the fights that she's had over her career, due to the lack of depth, that she's, managed to win some of the fights, in third gear, and then she kind of she was close to losing against Delphine Persoon, I think, first time round. I think if Delphine Persoon probably wasn't such an unknown, maybe the scorecards would have gone in her favor, with Katie Taylor being like the huge A-side that night. But that it was a close fight, really it was a toss-up when you looked at it on that night in the Amanda Serrano, first fight. I think Katie Taylor probably won the first three, and then, maybe the last 3 or 4, which, snuck it. Like 7-5, like on the scorecards. But I think the fact that the first fight was so close, and the fact that it's going to be like in her home country, her one and maybe only fight back home in the UK or back home in Ireland, I think that will just give her the edge. And then the legions and legions of fans behind you, how can that not, give you a push? How can that not give you that little bit of more adrenaline on the night, that extra wind to hopefully come home and put on a good show for the fans? And then it would be an unbelievable night to retire. Does she want those 2 crossover fights with Holly Holm and Cyborg, which Eddie Hearn has said, if she puts in an unbelievable performance against Amanda Serrano, then kind of like MMA style, take off the gloves, leave them in the middle of the ring, wave goodbye, and thank you for what you've done.
So you don't think we would see a trilogy, whether she wins or loses, in a possible rematch next year with Serrano?
If she loses, maybe. If she wins at Croke Park, why not be like someone like a Lennox Lewis and, just go out on a high?
Right.
Be one of your main rivals, because how often is it we say, people stay on too long? I'm sure she's probably made some good money. I don't think she's the sort of person that's probably riding around in a Lamborghini on a weekend and stuff like that. She seems, very down to earth, and she's probably very frugal with the money. I think that she could probably get that win and just be like, you know what, I'm gonna bow out on top, instead of going on like 1 or maybe even 2 fights too long. and, kind of tarnishing that legacy. Because, like we said, that they both need each other. And beyond that, there isn't much else for Serrano and there isn't much else for Katie Taylor.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that's the most money they can make with each other. Just like we talk about other fights, for example, Tank and Ryan Garcia. They obviously that's the biggest money fight for them both. Spence Crawford, that's the biggest money fight for them both. Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, biggest money fight. Wilder Fury, no, not Wilder Fury, maybe Wilder AJ. Anthony Joshua is probably the biggest money fight in the heavyweight division, next to Fury Joshua. So I agree with you in terms of if Taylor fights Serrano again next year, especially if it's in her home country, that if she wins, she retires. If she loses, I think it's a 50-50 shot that Katie Taylor comes back for the trilogy. But even if she personally doesn't want to come back for a trilogy fight and she announces after the fight, you know what? She was a better fighter on this night, but I'm 36, 37 years old. I've been doing this for X amount of years. It's time to hang it up. After a moment like that in her home country, probably sold out, a lot of attention. There's going to be a lot of external circumstances around her in the following months after that fight and interested parties that are going to want to try to convince her to do a third fight to try to squeeze as much money as they can out of that potential rivalry. So I think, as I mentioned, if she wins, I agree, she retires. If she loses, it's 50-50 whether she retires or goes for the trilogy. But either way, like you said, it's just them two. It's just them two who can fight each other. I mean, in terms of generating the interest and making that type of money. And it's just a matter of time of whether it's in New York or it's in the UK. So we will see. Also on the card, and probably the upset of the weekend. I don't even know if we can call it upset. It's becoming a more of a common theme throughout the year of boxing the last couple of years. Kiko Martinez gets the 4th round TKO over Jordan Gill. This was for the EBU European Featherweight Championship. Kiko Martinez, I mean, what could you say about him? What could you say about him after a performance like that? I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. He's just one of those guys. Like, he's dangerous. He's what does he get? Tell me, Mike. Give me a reaction.
Just another unbelievable performance. I think, we put it on social media about giving another run. I believe this was an eliminator for, maybe a title shot or, maybe like a first contender for the IBF again. And you literally can't count him out. Like, how many times has it been now? Like, Eddie Hearn has, decided to bring him in, putting in there against, one of his prospects, thinking that, they could have his name on their ledger. And he's decided, like, no, they can't. He's just, kid Galahad, twice this year, upsets of the year from Kiko Martinez. I think people thought that, Jordan Gill would probably, box his socks off. But, after Kiko I think it was like a little left hook he caught him with, quite early on. And you could see Jordan Gill was kind of like he lost his legs then. And then after that, Kiko just kind of like hunted him down, kind of like the Predator. He was trying to like box his way around the ring, but Kiko was just having none of it. And it's great to see. I think it was 18 years now. I think it was like since his pro debut, and he's gone on to have, like an amazing career, like two-weight world champion, multiple world title shots. I think he's like 3 or 4, maybe even 5-time European champion. I think he's got a legion of the British fans now as well. He comes over there and causes all those upsets, and I think they've fondly taken to him because he's all action, and he's actually packs a hell of a punch as well. And you'd kind of like to see him win something again, wouldn't you? You'd like to see him, get at least another title shot and then, sail off into the sunset. And he's given us, lots of great nights, lots of upsets that we like to see. We don't like to see those easy, A side and B side. Now and again it is good to see that we, potential B side opponent comes in and scores the shock. I'm sure Eddie didn't like it, but it's good for us.
Absolutely. So how many fights has he had this year? Is it just the Galahad and the Jordan Gill fight, or was it? I feel like there was another one in between.
Definitely had those two. Time is hard, isn't it? No, time flies nowadays.
Because the reason I'm asking is because, and obviously he wouldn't be chosen, but does he, assuming he had the Galahad fight and this fight?
Galahad was actually the end of last year.
Okay.
And then you were correct. He fought Josh Warrington, lost by TKO 7, and then Jordan Gill.
Okay, so let's just alternate the reality here. Let's just say he fought Galahad earlier this year, beat him, knocked him out. Fought Jordan Gill this year, beat him, knocked him out. Is he considered in the running for Fighter of the Year? For any, I guess if you want to say reputable outlet, not too many these days, but trying to be as objective as you can. I'm not saying he's going to be but does he deserve a place in the discussion, even if it's just a little bit?
Yeah, because it's hard, isn't it? Because you've got different types of levels, and it's always given to those opponents that are fighting in those probably A-star or 5-star type of events that win that. It would be nice if you could do a lower level one, like an A class and B class. Someone like Kiko Martinez kind of deserves that European level, Fighter of the Year or something like that, because some of those performances, he didn't just go in there against Kid Galahad as an underdog. He was, in there as a gimme, a quick, Kiko's European level. This is a little tick over fight. We've picked him. He wasn't a mandatory or anything like that. He was, someone they selected, thinking that we'd be an easy little win before he gets to fight somebody else, and and then he actually went in there and caused that upset. So I think his nickname, just kind of says it all, doesn't it? Was it La Sensation? Is that how you pronounce it?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's funny because I text you right away when Kiko Martinez got the win. I was like, what the hell, man? It's he's just one of those. I mean, who's another fighter that you can compare his career to at the moment? Is it him and Rosado? Kind of similar trajectories.
I think Kiko's been more successful, hasn't he? Substantially more successful.
Has he? I mean, Rosado's had some.
He's not been world champion.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's right. If you want to look at it that way, you would have to give the edge to Kiko Martinez.
Yeah, he's had a very unusual career, hasn't he? Because at one moment he's fighting a world level, and then he comes in as an opponent, and then he drops all the way back down to a European level, and then the next thing you know, he's up there fighting for world titles again. Just a very. It'd be good if he spoke English, just to get him on here.
Right.
If he spoke fluent English to get him on here and just have a conversation about his entire career and all the things that he's done, and I'm sure it'd be just so interesting, just to all the places he's fought, all the opponents going in as the B side, causing all of these upsets over the years. Look at some of the names he's been in with, over the last couple of years: Jordan Gill, Josh Warrington, Kid Galahad, Zelfa Barrett, Gary Russell, Josh Warrington again, Leo Santa Cruz, Scott Quigg, Carl Frampton again before that. Then some of the ones you may not know. Rendell Munro was a big name in the UK back in the day. He's been in with him twice. Jason Booth, another British fighter.
See, I think there's that type of career where you take all these hard fights throughout your career and you're still fighting, and the experience from those tough fights against those high level competitors obviously you learn something from it. So in your subsequent fights, you know, there's certain punches that like, oh, I've seen that before. Oh no, that doesn't. You're not going to do anything that I haven't seen before because I fought some high level guys. I can see somebody like it's in a fight we're going to talk about in a second. Jojo Diaz, Jojo Diaz is still 29, 30 years old, but he's been taking that route where he's been taking these tough fights, suffer some losses, but he's taking the tough fights. Kiko Martinez has been doing that for a lot longer, with more fights under his belt. Rosado, same thing. He beat Beck the Bully, probably, and then he fought Munguia, even though he lost to Munguia. But you take something away from these fights, and it kind of goes to the debate of, okay, you want to build a prospect, you want to build a fighter to get them to a certain level, but you can't protect them forever. You have to put them in there with other high level guys, whether they win or lose, because that's the only way they'll get better. And maybe that type of work that they get against those high level competitors will pay off in the long run at the end of their career. Because who knows? Kiko Martinez could get another world title. We don't know that. But as of right now, the momentum's on his side. So, and he's in his late 30s, something like that.
Oh, 36, I think.
Right? So he's, older, but he still has a lot left in the tank, supposedly. So, yeah, Kiko Martinez. He's obviously earned himself another payday. I don't know against who, but I'm sure Eddie Hearn is gonna find out who to put him in there with. Maybe another big fighter at featherweight. That because Kiko Martinez, he's just one of those names in that division that's still a good, solid win. He's not like, I wouldn't compare him to someone like Jose Pedraza, because Jose Pedraza has been losing a lot. He's been losing a lot. I mean, when's the last time Pedraza's had a significant win? I mean, think about it. At first PBC was the one using him, and then now Top Rank's been, last couple of years has been rotating him. So, and he's the one fighting Teofimo Lopez in December, right? Is it Pedraza? Right? So there you go. I mean, if he beats Lopez, he's back in the game with some momentum. That's something. But I think Kiko Martinez, at the moment, he stands alone in terms of that type of fighter right now, right? I mean, is there anybody else in the sport of boxing that has had the type of career he's had with the competitors he's faced that has that type of momentum right now and is in that position? I mean, you can't say it's like Gabe Rosado. Can't say it's Jose Pedraza. Is there anybody else you can think of?
I don't think so. Not that has closely similar, because like I said, he'll drop all the way down to European level, and you kind of think okay, Kiko's done. He's just kind of going to linger around at that level now, fight some up and coming guys to get a few paychecks, and then the next minute, some promoter like Eddie Hearn's, plucking him in there, thinking that he's going to be a nice B-side, and he's scoring these major upsets. So, yeah, I think he's a one and only.
Alone.
He's a standalone. He's an enigma. He's just there's nobody else really like him doing similar things. Still picking up these unbelievable victories at the age of 36.
That's crazy. Yeah. So he's earned himself another payday. So it's working out for him so far. Moving on, in a fight we just touched on in a second ago, from the Pachanga Arena in San Diego, California, on DAZN, also this past Saturday night. William Zepeda remains undefeated at 27-0 with a 12-round unanimous decision win over Joseph Jojo Diaz Jr. By scores of 119-109 twice and 118-110. I know I picked Jojo last week. You picked Zepeda. I didn't think it was going to be this lopsided in terms of the scores. But was this reminiscent at all? And tell me if you think this is accurate or not. In a way, was this reminiscent at all of the Gary Russell Jr. fight for Jojo Diaz Jr.? Gary Russell had the speed and the combos every time that's how Gary Russell fights, is combos quick, boom, 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 boom. Joseph Diaz is more of like a one punch guy. He tries to find his placement, goes to the body, but he tries to find you and land, individual shots. He's not really a combo guy. Zepeda was kind of doing the same thing that Gary Russell was doing, just staying with the pressure, with the speed. When he would respond, it'd be with the combo. So Diaz throws one, Zepeda throws four. Was it reminiscent of a Gary Russell Jr. fight in that regard, in a sense?
Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, a little bit. I just think Zepeda just did even more than that. Like his output. Zepeda set a lightweight record for the most punches thrown in a fight: 1,536 punches in 12 rounds. Substantially more than 100 punches. Every single round. So. I kind of said last week, I thought that's what would be the case. I think it's just one of those where, Jojo just doesn't throw enough. And listening to, Joe Diaz in his corner, he was helping out, Joseph Diaz, senior. They were both in the corner as coaches. They were kind of telling Jojo to, not stand at like that middle distance and let Zepeda throw, to get him close and kind of concentrate and throw in some hooks. Because, when he did have, when some of the bigger punches were landing, it was that right hook from Jojo. Zepeda didn't seem to, be able to time it, or he just didn't, had trouble seeing it coming through. But there just wasn't enough of it. Zepeda was throwing that much that it was just catching the eyes of the, the judges a lot more. And, fair play to Jojo. He took a bit of a beating and stayed in there the whole time. There was at times.
He has a chin.
No, yeah, he does. And, technically he's really, really good. And like you said, he places his shots really, really well. And you can see he's, very well schooled. It's just lacks that little bit of pop, that equalizer, and at times just doesn't throw that much. And in a fight like that against Zepeda, I always thought that was going to be the downfall for him, because he didn't have either of those. Like, he was always going to be, lower down in terms of output, and at the same time, he doesn't have like a Wilder where you like you can just suddenly catch him and lay him out. You can be 8, 9, 10 rounds down on the scorecards, and Wilder's always got that one punch where, unfortunately, Jojo doesn't have that. But fair play to him. We've said many times on the show, this new version of Jojo Diaz, the 2.0, will fight anybody. And I thought he was very professional afterwards. I thought his interview that he gave in the ring was very nice. He just kind of congratulated Zepeda on, how good he was on the night, and on to, the next one. He's not scared to go in there with anybody. I think he's one of those guys that's realized, like, win, lose or draw, if you're in there in the big fights, the Zepedas, the Ryan Garcias, the Devin Haney fights, the Gervonta Davis, you're going to get a big payday. What's the point in protecting yourself and just kind of running around getting lower paydays when it's a short career? Get in there and fight the big guys.
And essentially, there's instances where those guys who already have a couple losses are actually more dangerous to fight at later stages in the careers. Like, they are, because they've already suffered losses. So they're like, okay, well, I've already lost. I know how it feels. So, I'm dangerous. I'm going to go for it. Like De La Hoya. Like, look at De La Hoya. Like, De La Hoya is still looked at as one of the best boxers in the history of the sport. One of the most popular, one of the most financially successful. And he fought a bunch of killers. Even when he took losses, he was still the biggest draw after those losses against those people. Like, those fighters, a lot of them didn't really get the rub from a financial, perspective that they would have. De La Hoya kept it, So I think Jojo, in terms of the whole loss thing, he's still dangerous. He's still young. Like I said, I think he's 29, 30 years old. He's still a name. He can still fight. And I think that even though he lost, there was a couple punches from, for example, that right hook. They were like in the middle of the ring that stumbled Zepeda back. that was probably the hardest punch of the fight, right? I mean, if you can, and that's something that you got to give JoJo credit there. Zepeda throws 1,500 punches. That's a record for the lightweight division, and none of those punches were as hard as JoJo Diaz's right hook, which almost put him to the ground. Gave credit to Zepeda. He took it, stumbled back, found his composure, came back in. And JoJo Diaz isn't really a power guy. But like I said last week, it's the placement of his punches and how he finds you that adds. It's kind of like an element of surprise. And his body shots. He's a great body puncher. So, Zepeda, I think he was right. A lot of people were looking at this like a test for him. Well, he passed it. He definitely passed it. But can he fight like that in all of his subsequent fights against other top lightweights? Can he throw 1,500 punches a fight? Can he fight a Leo Santa Cruz? How many punches would that be? 5,000? 4,000 punches? 3,000, 3,500 punches between him and Santa Cruz? Imagine that. I mean, I know Santa Cruz fights at 130, but he can fight at 135. But the Golden Boy PBC, obviously, we know that situation. But Zepeda passed a test. And before we talk about where Zepeda goes next, JoJo's still a name. JoJo can still fight. He's still a name at 135 pounds. And he'll still be getting another shot at somebody. I'm not sure who, but I can honestly see somebody. Do you think Ryan and JoJo fight eventually? I think they do. Right?
Yeah, I think so. Whether it's towards the end of JoJo's career and whether Ryan's got a little bit older, I think just the amount of tickets and the amount of fans that would want to see that in the Southern California area, I think it's perfect.
Yeah.
But as long as Golden Boy have those two, in their stable, they've got a big fight that they can put on at any time. I think there'll be a little bit of needle between them both, and then it's going to sell tickets, isn't it? JoJo sells pretty well, and obviously Ryan's a global superstar, so
right.
Sure, we'll see that. Maybe they'll look at that, if they don't get the Davis fight for Ryan.
Right. No, yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I mean, I don't think Ryan would fight JoJo next if he doesn't get the Davis fight, but I think regardless if he gets the Davis fight or not, eventually JoJo and Ryan, Golden Boy, will make that matchup in the next year or two. I would say probably in the next year and a half. So, and as for Zepeda, where do we see Zepeda go next? I think that Zepeda, because obviously Zepeda Ryan's also a possibility in the future. But I think Golden Boy would put JoJo Diaz versus Ryan first before they put Zepeda. So knowing that or speculating on that, where do we see Zepeda go next?
Unfortunately, I think we'll see him in there with a nobody, some type of unknown name with a well padded record from like Mexico or Southern California, somewhere down Mexico, Venezuela, Argentina, somewhere like that. Because this division, unfortunately, for the people lower down, it's all held up, isn't it? Devin Haney has all the world titles, and it looks like he's going to be in there with either Shakur Stevenson or Lomachenko, which leaves everyone else kind of just like wading water at the minute. So they're all kind of like hoping that they can just sit by and wait for their like mandatories to fall into place, unless anybody decides that they want to go for like an IBO world title and fight like Maxie Hughes. I see, Zepeda probably just kind of like waiting in the wings and fighting some other people just to get a little run out, because PBC probably won't put them in there. So unless we see like a comeback of like Jorge Linares for Zepeda, or even JoJo, maybe even Golden Boy, like JoJo can fight, Linares and get back in the win column whilst he's waiting for Ryan.
Right. Yeah. I think likely possibility. But Zepeda, like I said, he passed the test, shown that he's a type of player at 135 pounds. So we'll see from there. Mexican style, that's always fun to watch. As for Ryan, I think he's done at 135. Like he said before, I think he really is done. I think he's a tall kid. He's a big kid. Do you think Ryan fights before the end of the year? I don't think Davis does. I don't think Davis does because of the court situation, the legal situation he has upcoming. But do you think Ryan fights before the end of this year? Because we only have 2 months left.
Yeah, the talk wasn't it, for like early December for the Ryan Gervonta fight, and we're not far away now, and you would imagine a fight of that magnitude would have wanted at least a few weeks of press conferences, and maybe even do one like over in New York, another one on the West Coast as well. So I don't see that happening unless that had to the start of the year, and obviously they're not going to go up against Tyson Fury, right? There he's December 3rd, so that I would imagine that weekend's kind of like boxed off for him. Maybe Ryan gets a little run out against somebody just to get himself a little Christmas payday and, get something, so he's not been sat out like most of the year. And then, if they are going to do that, I would say probably closer towards, do you think they would put it maybe around like the Super Bowl, hoping they can kind of capture something from that?
I saw a tweet, and I apologize for whoever posted it, I forgot. And I haven't verified this, so I'm going to take it with a grain of salt, but it seems like it's accurate. They posted screenshots of the MGM Grand that was reserved in Las Vegas for sometime at the end of January. And I think there was a date in February, and then May and September of next year. PBC had a hold on 4 dates next year. I think January and February are possibly for Tank Davis, Ryan. Super Bowl's in February for American football, big weekend. Imagine having that fight, Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, on that Saturday before the Super Bowl. That's a lot of publicity. That's huge. That is huge. So I think Ryan and Golden Boy. I think Golden Boy would want to put Ryan in with another fight, and just kind of say, forget it. Let's just move you on. We'll figure it out later. But I think Ryan, because he's making such a big deal of it, especially online and Twitter, and kind of posting that he wants to fight and all that, is forcing the hand of Golden Boy to wait until Tank Davis's legal situation gets sorted out. Because if he gets any type of incarceration time, then obviously we're gonna have to wait for that, and if he doesn't, if he gets like community service or fine or whatever, then they can proceed in making a date. But there is a chance that he could get some type of jail time. There is, that's a likely scenario. But we're gonna have to wait and see. But I think Ryan he's gonna wait, and he's forcing the hand of Golden Boy to wait and go from there. So, but there's a bunch of speculation that De La Hoya has said in interviews, actually, so it's in speculation that DAZN has to be involved with the Tank Davis fight in some type of cross-promotional broadcast. And Steven Espinoza of Showtime has said in interviews that if DAZN is proposed to be involved, then the fight may or may not happen. That's pretty much, he said it like that, I think, to just kind of save face, to not immediately kill the negotiations so Golden Boy can come to the table. But he said it, he's an attorney, he's a lawyer. It was very smart how he described it. If DAZN's involved, then the fight may or may not happen. He's pretty much implying, hey, if you guys want DAZN involved, we're not going to do it. But, Tank Davis has sold more tickets. He's been on pay-per-view. That's how they look at it, as opposed to Ryan, who has a big social following. How do you measure? But in boxing, we've always traditionally measured pay-per-view, butts and seats. And if you look at it that way, Tank Davis is the bigger star. He's the more he generates more financial money in a sense. So I don't know how they're going to get over that hump, because everybody says, "Oh, well, Ryan doesn't have a contract with the Zone." Yeah, but he has a contract with Golden Boy, who has a contract with the Zone. I don't know why people think like oh, that shouldn't matter. Ryan doesn't have a contract with the Zone. You don't think that promoters and broadcast partners, to an extent, when they make deals with promoters, there are certain specifications that they put in these contracts. They're legal documents. You don't think it says like, hey, for Canelo or Ryan Garcia, you can't take him to another network unless we give the okay. You don't think that's in there? And people think, oh, well, Ryan should have the power. Like, he has power. He's got that profile. But that's why he's posting online so much about the negotiations and what he wants, because he's trying to build public pressure. And obviously we're speculating here, because from a legal standpoint, from a contractual standpoint, I don't think he really has any power. And the Zone and Golden Boy are saying, nope, like, we're not, unless they want to work with us, that it's going to be difficult to make the fight. And Showtime and PBC, Steven Espinoza and that whole side, they're thinking the same way. So, unless we get Tank Davis coming out and tweeting, which I feel like he does it on purpose sometimes. He tweets stuff and then he deletes it within like the hour. But he's done that several times. So it's like, okay, you want people to see this. But I think that's his way of trying to build pressure against his own team, PBC, Mayweather Promotions, and all that. But who knows? Who knows how that's going to turn out? But I think it's funny we talked about Ryan. We started talking about Ryan Tank after we were talking about Ryan, the Zepeda, JoJo. But it is a lightweight division. We talked about Zepeda, Ryan, JoJo all being under the Golden Boy banner. So all of them will eventually fight each other. JoJo, Ryan, Zepeda, Ryan, assuming they all stay with Golden Boy, which seems like it'll happen. But yeah, we will see. And Zepeda is going to get hopefully a bigger name, a more established name in the lightweight division sometime next year. And like you said, I agree. He gets kind of like a softer touch or like a unknown name in his next fight, and then they're going to try to make a fight with maybe somebody from Top Rank. Top Rank has a Lomachenko, Devin Haney, stuff like that. So we will see. Also on the card, friend of the show, Alexis Lex Rocha gets the 21st victory of his career with a 10-round unanimous decision win over Jesus Perez by scores of 100-90 twice and 99-91. What do you think about Lex's fight?
Good fight. I was hoping that, Lex was going to be able to get him out of there. He was in there with a relatively unknown Jesus Perez. Lex did dominate, dominated, pretty much every single round, as the scorecards showed you. On to bigger and better things for him. It's going to be interesting to see where he goes from now, because the next stage is you're looking at like some of the bigger names, right? You're looking at some of the world champions up at 147, but unfortunately Crawford and Spence, have all the belts at the minute, so he's going to have to, propel himself into a mandatory position and then hope for either Spence or Crawford to go up to 154, or maybe even both will eventually if they're not, going to fight each other. So, I hope next year is going to be the year for Lex.
He called out Conor Benn.
Yeah, I mean that would be a good fight. I just think obviously Conor Benn's got that legal thing to do at the minute. Probably going to be some sort of suspension, and if he does come back next year, I'm sure they'll probably try to reinvigorate the Conor Benn Eubank fight, just due to the fact there's so much money in the UK for that fight. It was nice to see Lex going out there though, and putting some names about from people that he'd like to face, because in this day and age in boxing, that's kind of what you need to do. You need to have that persona, I guess, of calling people out and creating fights. We see how many fights nowadays, get made on social media. It's kind of humorous. How many people, especially in, boxing and UFC, kind of call each other out, and the next thing the fight's been made.
Right. Absolutely. The Conor Benn fight, I actually think it'd be a very intriguing fight between him and Lex. And obviously, I think Lex would have to go to the UK for that. Just kind of like how Kell Brook came to the United States with the Sean Porter fight, I believe 2014 at the StubHub Center here in LA. But like you said, Conor Benn has to figure out his legal situation over there in the UK. And then once that's figured out, then they're going to revisit the Chris Eubank fight. I'm assuming just because there's so much money in it. So who does Lex fight? Honestly, I think Lex has to move up to 154. And he's not going to be able to land a significant name at 147 pounds. I mean, unless you got Virgil Ortiz, who's also a Golden Boy stablemate, but I just think that Lex is, and it could happen to Virgil Ortiz too. Could be the same thing. I mean, Spence and Crawford are tied up, and Crawford is fighting Avanesian. Obviously, he didn't want to fight Virgil Ortiz because big threat. He's like, oh no, I still want to keep the Spence fight alive. Ortiz is too much of a threat to jeopardize that fight. So, yeah, I think unfortunately Lex is just stuck between a rock and a hard place because Golden Boy just doesn't have a plethora of welterweights in their stable, and the only significant welterweight that he could possibly fight is Virgil Ortiz because they're both under the Golden Boy banner. But other than that, I think he moves up without having a significant name at 147 pounds. I really do. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I love the Rocha Ortiz Jr. fight. And I suppose at some point you've got to look at it and think, you know what, like, should we just wait around and kind of fake some of these, unfortunately, lesser known names, I guess, in the 147-pound division just because PBC won't share their toys? Why not? Why not do it? If any promotion was going to do it, it probably would be Golden Boy. And Virgil Ortiz needs an opponent. Alexis Rocha needs an opponent. Let's do it, next summer. Make it like a big event in either Southern California or, over in Texas. I'm sure that we don't need to say, but I'm sure that, either Golden Boy or, Lex's manager or something like that will probably reach out to all of the governing bodies and just say, like, what's the chances of, getting a shot, or what's the chances of, Spence or Crawford moving up? And if it doesn't seem like it's going to be anytime soon, then why not put them in together? It's probably the biggest payday for both. And, I think Rocha beats Ortiz or Ortiz beats Rocha, then the next shot for either of them has to be a world title shot, right?
I mean, ideally.
Rocha's 10th in the rankings on BoxRec. Virgil Ortiz Jr.'s 4th.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah. Ideally, but all the belts are tied up.
Yeah.
So what can you do? You can't really do anything. It's going to be politicking around for these promoters and kind of go from there. But yeah, we will see. I mean, the only possible, and I don't even think it's probable, but is maybe somebody like Jose Ramirez moves up to 147 and fights Virgil Ortiz or fights Lex, but it would have to be a cross-promotional fight, Top Rank and Golden Boy. Jose Ramirez, Virgil Ortiz at 147 pounds, I think would be a pretty exciting fight. Even Lex and Jose Ramirez. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, I think Jose Ramirez is still fighting at 140, right?
Yeah, there is talk of him, though, isn't there? Moving up to 147. There was talk for some time about him, moving up in weight. So we'll have to wait and see, I guess, see what happens there. But give us Ortiz Jr. Rocha, in my opinion. I'd love to see that. Two prospects against each other.
I wouldn't even call Ortiz a prospect anymore. I think Rocha is at that level where, like, okay, let's level you up.
Yeah, definitely. I think they've both had amazing careers to date. So why not just throw them in against each other and it's sink or swim time.
What about Rocha against Who Ortiz fight in Texas?
Was it Karvalauskis?
No. Who did he fight in Texas? Well, I know he's fought a lot in Texas. It was on the Zone.
Mickinson?
No.
Maurice Hooker?
Hooker. What about a Rocha Hooker fight?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be a good fight in terms of a name value as well. You know, a lot of people know who Maurice Hooker is. I think.
I know Blair Cobbs beat Hooker, which was surprising to me.
Yeah,
I think surprising to a lot of people. But why not? Might as well put Hooker against Rocha too.
Yeah, why not? I mean, like you say, people know who Hooker is, so it's a named opponent for Rocha, and like we said, he's got time to fill, unfortunately, until the belts become vacant, or he gets a shot against one of the big guys.
Right. Yeah. Moving on, also this past Saturday from the theater at the Madison Square Garden in New York City on ESPN Plus, Vasily Lomachenko, the Matrix, returns and gets the 17th win of his career with a 12-round unanimous decision win over Jermaine Ortiz by scores of 116, 112, 117, 111, and 115, 113. All right, Mike, for somebody who looks at all those scores, you can't really tell what the fight was about unless you watched it. What would you tell them?
Looking at the scores?
Yeah. If somebody asked you, like, hey, these scores are all over the place. One's 115, 113, one's 117, 111, one's 116, 112. And if you didn't watch it and somebody asked you, like, well, what kind of fight was it? What was the most accurate score from your opinion? What would you tell them?
I mean, it was a close fight. The most accurate one for me, I would imagine, is either the 115, 113 or 116, 112. It definitely wasn't, a vintage performance from Lomachenko.
Do you think it's because of inactivity and he was in the Ukraine conflict in his country, or do you think it's just age? I mean, obviously it's a combination. He's older, but
yeah,
I think he's rusty because he's been out of the ring.
Yeah, you can give him that, I guess, but I think it's a combination of both, isn't it? Like father time, and then obviously doing, just being out the ring, the usual kind of like coming in, throwing a combination, and then coming off to the side, stepping out, and then throwing the unorthodox punches from there. Is just they weren't really there, and then he's always started kind of slowly, because that kind of thing that everybody uses now about like, oh, he's starting slow. He's downloading the data kind of came from Lomachenko, if I remember correctly. But, in this fight, and then also the fight, where he lost against Teofimo Lopez, he was just giving up like round after round after round. And it's kind of like, okay, at some point you're going to have to turn it on, because you're going to lose this fight. And it was kind of similar in this performance, I thought. I thought he kind of stole it, in the later rounds, to be honest. And I think, unfortunately, being a big Lomachenko fan myself, I think we may have seen the best of him. And I know he tends to be one of those fighters that you either seem to love him and think he's, he was a great talent, or people seem to think he's like massively overrated. There seems to be no like in between with him, which is kind of strange. But it's going to be difficult. I don't know if he fights, Devin Haney next, which seems to be the case. Bob Arum seems to be a big Lomachenko fan himself, so I think he'll probably give him the opportunity to fight Devin. And we saw how big he was in the ring. He was so much bigger and so much thicker as well. Which if Lomachenko's not on his A game in terms of being that elusive Lomachenko that we used to see, I could see Devin kind of winning it relatively easy, which is hard for me to say, because I've kind of loved Loma over the years. Some of the performances and some of this stuff that he's done is just, in my opinion, is just so underrated. A lot of the people that were on his resume at that time were killers. Right. Nicholas Walters was going in there and just mopping people. Yeah. And Lomachenko made him look so easy. Rigondeaux, the amount of people that said that Rigondeaux was going to beat Lomachenko so easily, it was like, oh, he's overrated.
But Rigondeaux did move up in weight for that fight.
But at that time, people didn't really say that though until after the fact, when he made it look so easy. Everyone was kind of, yeah, but Rigon moved up in weight.
No, you're right. I agree with you. There was a lot of people who did say that, but I had that concern prior. I was interested in the fight because they both had such amateur pedigree, and then they were just great fighters, Olympians. But I had that concern. I was like, well, Rigondeaux's moving up in weight. for the first time, essentially, to fight his counterpart in a higher division. I always thought that was such a big concern, and obviously it ended up being right. But you're right, though, from a hype perspective and a talent perspective, and people saying like, "Oh, they didn't start saying that narrative until after." I agree with that.
And you've got to look at, even though he's been in the lightweight division for some time now, and all of the stuff that he's done, when you actually look at like Loma against some of the other lightweights, only then I think do you realize what he's been doing for essentially a featherweight. Because
Right.
when he's in there with like Devin Haney, he looks tiny compared to him. Just his bones and his like muscle structure, he's tiny. He's so thin compared
But
to.
haven't we always said that though, and not just us, but like the boxing community, like the hardcore boxing fan base, that Lomachenko is essentially a 130 pounder, 126 pounder who hit his ceiling at 135 pounds in terms of the weight. He can't move up to 140. That's just too much. And 130, even a lot of people that were saying that 135 is still a lot. And look at how much he's exceeded being at 135 and the success that he's obtained.
I don't think he gets the credit for it though. People do say that, like you said, people do say that, but at the same time, the conversation just finishes there. They don't sit there and say, you know what he's done is kind of, amazing for somebody, or with his small stature to be in there against these bigger, naturally bigger opponents who probably balloon up to what, 140, 145, 150 after
Probably
rehydration.
150, closer to 150, yeah.
Yeah.
Like look at even though he lost to Teofimo Lopez is a big kid. And Lomachenko, it's not like he got outclassed by Teofimo Lopez. Lomachenko still made it a good fight, and I think I said that at the time. The rounds that Lomachenko won were a lot more decisive than the rounds that Lopez beat him for, in terms of the work. So, yeah, I think he's hit his ceiling at that weight class. I think everybody knows that who watches the sport. But is Devin Haney going to get? I mean, he obviously Lomachenko's still winning. He won this fight. But I think it is a combination of his age, but also the inactivity. He went and participated in his country in the Ukraine. The conflict's ongoing over there, so that took time away from the gym, from the ring, from the training. But now he's back in the win column. Only has a one loss against Teofimo Lopez, and Lopez already lost to Kambosos, and so that loss doesn't really look too crazy. It looks good for Lopez, but it doesn't really look too crazy for Lomachenko. If he fights Devin Haney, like you said, Devin Haney's a big kid when you saw them next to each other. 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I think people would have been like, "Oh yeah, Lomachenko beats Devin Haney easily." But now Lomachenko getting older, Haney's 23, 24. He hasn't even hit his prime yet. He's already undisputed lightweight champion of the world. I think Haney has would be the betting odds favorite slightly. But I think the fight that we're looking at, if you want to put it from a Vegas odds standpoint, in the future, sometime next year, is Shakur Devin Haney, right? At 135 pounds for the undisputed titles.
Yeah, I think in all honesty, I think we'll probably see that, going off that last Lomachenko performance. I think, I think we're hopefully going to be lucky enough to see probably two of the next big stars over the next, 5 to 10 years, hopefully face off against each other. And let's hope we see it, several times. Let's hope it's, like a trilogy or something, something we get our teeth into.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But the Matrix is back. So it adds another name that's ongoing in the lightweight division throughout the year. So we will see. But it does seem like Lomachenko, Devin Haney is next, since Top Rank does have a third option for a fight on Devin Haney after the Kambosos fight. Moving on, fight previews. This upcoming Saturday, the 5th of November, from the Etihad Arena, hope I said that right, from Abu Dhabi in the Middle East on DAZN. This is definitely a fight I've been looking forward to since it got announced. One of the most intriguing fights of this entire year in the sport. Dimitri Bivol, coming off the biggest win of his career against Canelo Alvarez in Las Vegas a couple months ago, defends his WBA super light heavyweight title against Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, 44-0 on DAZN. I think I mentioned that. This is an intriguing fight. Ramirez is a huge light heavyweight. He's massive. He's essentially a cruiserweight. But Bivol he's just got that Eastern European technique, and he could fight. This is the real first test, and it's crazy to say after 44 fights. It's crazy to say that for Zurdo Ramirez, this is his first legitimate high-level test. Who wins this fight, Mike? Who are you taking?
Honestly, I was thinking about it all day. I was like, obviously, I knew we had the podcast tonight, and I'm sat there thinking, I'm like, you know what? Bivol is obviously the better boxer, better mover, but is Gilberto just too big? Is he going to be just rounds and rounds down? But eventually he manages to corner him and, kind of just catch him and beat him. Ramirez isn't like a huge one-punch knockout, but, he'll catch you in a corner and just unload, a lot of clubbing shots and kind of take you out that way. And it's... I'm going to go Bivol. I'm going to...
How?
Unanimous decision. I don't see Bivol knocking Ramirez out. Ramirez is probably going to rehydrate and be absolutely enormous on the night. Probably closer to a cruiserweight or a heavyweight by the time he's rehydrated.
This is one of those you really have to think about. And it's just, and a lot of it has to do, at least for me, because of the size of Ramirez. He's a big guy. If they were both the same size, I would edge it to Bivol without question. But Ramirez's size, he's a big guy. He's obviously probably got the larger amount of strength. Man. I'm going Bivol. I think I agree with you. I think Bivol wins it by decision. But I think Ramirez is really going to try to knock him out.
I think
because Bivol's a boxer. He's a technical boxer. He can fight. But
I think it's one of those you can't knock out what you can't catch.
Right.
And I think Bivol's just going to go in there, and I think he'll be very strategic, and I think he'll just, throw a little combination, and that's it. He'll be in and out of range constantly, and just try to keep Gilberto, like turning and not let him get set. And I think it'll get to the point where Ramirez might get frustrated, and Bivol will start to catch him more because he'll start taking some risks because he'll be down so many rounds. I think it'll be, if Ramirez manages to catch him, I think it'll be a good fight. But I think Bivol is just, that. We saw in the fight against Canelo, he just stuck to his game plan. He didn't ever let Canelo, dictate what was going on inside the ring. And after that, he just made it look relatively easy against, Canelo, which I don't think anybody really expected. And I think it'll be similar against Ramirez. I think he's just so experienced. He's seen and done everything, in the amateurs. And now we're getting to see how good he is, in the pros.
Right. Yeah, that is an intriguing fight, though. Just because we're both picking Bivol, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be an intriguing fight. It's unfortunate it's in the Middle East, but obviously they're obviously getting paid a lot of money over there with the relationship Matchroom has over there. But I think I'm going Bivol decision, but I think Ramirez is definitely going to try to knock him out, as I mentioned. And Golden Boy is praying. Obviously, Eddie Hearn, Matchroom, and Golden Boy each hoping their fighter wins. But imagine if Ramirez wins, Golden Boy then is going to start beating the drum for a Canelo fight at 175 pounds. De La Hoya is going to be like, oh yeah, Canelo, here, let's fight the best light heavyweight in the world, Gilberto Ramirez at 175 pounds. He beat the guy who beat you. So let's fight him. All Mexican clash in Vegas. And you know what? I think that would sell pretty well. But Ramirez is a monster. He's a big guy. Either way, this is an intriguing matchup, and this is the first test for Gilberto Ramirez. And there's a big part of me that's really looking forward to see that. Like, okay, how does he respond after 44 fights? He's finally got a name in front of him. Let's put it to the test. You know, we talked about Zepeda earlier having a test against Jojo Diaz. He's obviously in the earlier stages of his career if you compare the two. But Zero Ramirez, after 44 fights, he's got something going there. So we will see. Also on that card, man, I can never say his first name. Rakimov, 16-0-1, goes up against Zelfa Barrett for the IBF Super Featherweight titles. And Chantel Cameron, 16-0, goes up against Jessica McCaskill for the undisputed lightweight world titles. What do you think about both of these fights?
The Rakimov one is, you know, it's very interesting. You got Rakimov, more of a brawler, you know, big and strong, against Zelfa Barrett, you know, definitely much more of a boxer. So it's a really well matched fight, and the winner of that's going to have to fight Joe Cordina. You know, Joe Cordina, you know, couldn't fight Rakimov due to injuries, so he had to relinquish the belt. We know how strict the IBF are with those sorts of rules, which gave Zelfa Barrett the chance to step in. And I'm sure all the British fans would love, you know, Zelfa Barrett to be victorious. So we get a big, you know, Zelfa Barrett, Joe Cordina dust up back in the UK. Chantel Cameron McCaskill, interesting fight. You know, Chantel Cameron, 16-0 against Jessica McCaskill, who's, in my opinion, a little bit limited. Came to boxing, you know, kind of late. Managed to get, you know, undisputed. But managed to pick up, you know, a lot of titles just due to the, you know, lack of depth, I think, in, you know, women's boxing. Picking winners, I'm going to go. I think maybe Rakimov wins that one, and then I think Chantel Cameron might score the upset in the other. You know, Zelfa Barrett fought Kiko Martinez and was robbed, you know, Kiko Martinez blind. Kiko should have really have got the upset win that night on the scorecards, but they gave it to essentially the A side in Zelfa Barrett. I think Rakimov probably comes out victorious there, and I think Chantel Cameron might score the upset in the other.
I could see that. And also this upcoming weekend from the Armory in Minneapolis, Minnesota on Showtime, David Morrell, 7-0, goes up against Adios. That's an interesting name. Yerbo Susanelli. I know I said that wrong. I apologize. Who's also undefeated, 16-0 for the WBA super middleweight titles. Is this a real super middleweight title, WBA? Or is it just one of those like PBC?
You know, David Morrell is, you know, he's a good fighter. You know, the Cuban guy who turned professional and picked up, you know, like a WBA trinket, I guess you could call it, since, you know, obviously the real WBA is held by Canelo. But, you know,
what happened to reducing the titles and all that? You know, it was all just for show, wasn't it? You know, they all just said that, and it's still going.
Yeah, essentially. No, it was really, you know, more of that from the WBA. I think, you know,
virtue signaling, right?
Yeah, exactly. They just did that, but I think it's going to be a good fight eventually when, you know, Morrell steps up and faces someone, you know, bigger, like maybe, you know, Canelo later down the line, because you know, he is a good fighter, 7-0, as you said, with six knockouts. Don't know too much about his opponent. I think Morrell will probably do the job on the night, and then hopefully move on to bigger and better things. But, you know, him also, you know, he's kind of running out of opponents until he can get up there and fight, you know, Canelo.
That's nowhere near, though. That's not anywhere near.
Well, he's got a lot of bigger names that I think we'd like to see him in there, especially since he's with the PBC. You know, why not get like David Benavidez in there? You know, Caleb Plant. You know, why is Morrell essentially the parading him around as the WBA super, but he's fighting these lesser known names? Like, how on earth is he a world champion?
No, yeah. I mean, it's all for marketing purposes. You know, We know that on TV, a lot of these broadcasters, we've been told by very, very reliable people that a lot of these broadcasters like, hey, no, we need something attached to it. Give us some type of title, find a world title or something, you know, and they'll attach it to it. So if a casual viewer who's watching TV flips the channel or sees a ad for this fight. Oh wow, it's a world championship fight. Let me check it out. They might not know the names, but like, oh, these are two world championship high level boxers. That's what draws them in. It's a marketing tactic. So that's what it is. But so much for decreasing these belts, these regular belts, these interim belts. Looks like it was all a lie. Can't trust boxing a lot. Just like the mob. Didn't they say the mob used to be involved in boxing back in the day? It still is. It's just in the shadows. It's just in the shadows. Also on the card, Jason Rosario goes up against Brian Mendoza. Rosario is a former unified super welterweight champion of the world. What do you think about this fight?
Good comeback fight for Rosario. I think at the time when he hit the scenes with that unexpected victory, we were all about him because he's he's a bit of an action fighter. 23-3, 17 knockouts. So he's one of the we like to watch boxing because we want to see knockdowns and we want to see knockouts. It's a gladiatorial sport. So I don't see this one going the full 10 or 12, the full 10 rounds it's scheduled to be. I think Rosario wins by hopefully a spectacular knockout.
News and notes of this week's episode of The Last Round. The problem child, Jake Paul, returned as he took down MMA legend Anderson Silva this past Saturday night. Jake Paul dropped and routed to a decision the former UFC star in a 8-round matchup. I believe in Arizona, right? Glendale, Arizona, which is just outside Phoenix. This fight was at cruiserweight, and it was in front of a reported crowd, announced crowd of 14,430 fans, which was said to be the highest grossing boxing event for ticket revenue in the history of the arena. It could have been. I mean, Jake Paul is popular, so we'll see. Obviously, he called out Canelo. He talked about Canelo's name after. But honestly, I think the next fight we're going to see is Tommy Fury. I think that fight is still on the table. But does Tommy Fury come over here, or does Jake Paul go over there?
Yeah, I think it needs to be Tommy Fury in the UK due to the visa issues with the Daniel Kinahan stuff, or it'll be Nate Diaz, who was there and supposedly caused some sort of issues in the back. He was trying to get into his dressing room and got into a little scuffle, and then was throwing bottles and cans and stuff like that between Nate Diaz's crew and Jake Paul's security crew. So Ariel Hawani reported. But it was surprising for me. I know a lot of people on social media are kind of saying the fight was fixed. What's your view on that, Danny?
I mean, I saw the punch, the knockdown. That what they were focusing that on a lot. I mean, I didn't take it as it was being fixed. I think Anderson Silva is older. He's in his 40s, isn't he? Jake Paul is late 20s, or something like that. He's a big kid, and we've seen him train. We've seen him develop over. I mean, look at it this way: Jake Paul, from the beginning, when he first started boxing, we thought, oh, it's just a first show. It's nothing serious. And then the next fight happened. Oh, it's just for show. He's just doing it. And the next fight happened. Regardless if he hasn't fought any legitimate boxers, he's fought fighters with years of training in combat sports. And he's been winning. And we've been told by people in the sport that Jake Paul actually trains very hard. He's been taking his training very seriously, and he's putting in the work. And then he gets involved with his MVP, Most Valuable Promotions. Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor, helps that out. So no, I don't buy into that rumor that it was fixed. But crazier things have happened. I just talked about boxing being a mob sport and all that stuff. You never know. But no, I don't think it was fixed. But he called out Canelo. He was talking about Nate Diaz. We'll see. But I think the Tommy Fury fight is really going to be tried to made next. But Jake Paul, like you said, is likely going to have to go to the UK, where I think it's a bigger fight. I think it's a bigger fight in the UK because Tommy Fury has these visa issues and allegedly involving Daniel Kinahan situation and all that, Tyson Fury. So we will see. Also, the Nevada State Athletic Commission has lifted Jarrell Big Baby Miller's lengthy suspension for failing yet another pre-fight test for his performance enhancing drugs. Promoter Dimitri Salita, who's Miller's co-promoter, informed BoxingScene.com this week that Nevada has licensed Miller, which will allow him to fight in Las Vegas and elsewhere in the United States. The 34-year-old Miller has boxed twice this year in Argentina and Tennessee. But most commissions affiliated with the Association of Boxing Commissions in the United States had recognized Nevada's suspension of Miller. It's only a matter of time before he gets a big name, a significant name of a heavyweight, right? Am I wrong or right?
No, 100%. I'd just like to add that was Keith Idek from Boxing Scene.
Okay.
Give him the props for that. Yeah, 100%. I think we've said before, I think if I was him, you just go full villain. You just buy into it, kind of like WWE style, like, flip the bird to the crowd and, you're going to get paid probably, a decent amount of money just to go in there and be the B-side villain to, maybe even Anthony Joshua. I honestly could see Eddie Hearn scratching his head, doesn't want to put AJ in there with somebody dangerous because of the potential fights with Wilder and Fury later down the line. They've got a storyline. AJ can be like, hey, I want to come in there. I want to knock you out. You were using performance-enhancing drugs to try to hurt me in the ring. Blah, blah, blah. And Miller, as we know, is good on the mic. And there's a storyline for that. And I would want to see it. I would pay to see it.
That's the crazy thing about it is he's definitely going to get another shot. So we will see. Before we sign off here, I do want to mention some news that I saw on Twitter right now. I'm going to give the credit to Dan Canobio of CompuBox. I guess Terrence Crawford, within the last hour or so, was on Instagram Live talking about his side of the Errol Spence situation. So I'm going to read some stuff that he would reportedly was saying. He said, Terrence Crawford said, quote, Al Heyman, Al's a good dude. He's charming. I like talking to him, but Spence is his guy. And then also Crawford said that there were two companies out there that wanted to give him and Errol Spence $25 million apiece for the fight. So Crawford called Spence himself to see if he was interested. Crawford said Spence was interested, but ultimately had to ask Al Heyman for permission first. Spence never called back, so Crawford called Al Heyman himself and told him about this hedge fund willing to put up the money for the fight. Crawford said that Al Heyman was reluctant to do a flat fee. Crawford then said that he was never offered a guarantee or any transparency in the talks. He just received a take it or leave it. Crawford added that David Avanesian is a tough opponent, a tough fight for a bigger purse. He also said that he always had a guarantee while fighting for Bob Arum and Top Rank. Crawford said that Spence went MIA when talks stopped and stalled. And he also said, there's a couple here. He also said that Crawford said, quote, I heard through the grapevine that Spence is going to fight Keith Thurman. And then he said also, quote, y'all mad at me for getting a bag. All the biggest fights going through BLK Prime. And then he says, quote, after this fight, if Spence is successful and I'm successful, I'll be ready for whatever. Based on that breaking news, what's your reaction?
I'm assuming the hedge fund that he was talking about with the 25 million is probably the same hedge fund that owns BLK Prime.
You would think so, right?
Yeah, I'm just.
They're like an investment firm.
Yeah, and I'm sure And I mean, it sucks doesn't it, for Crawford and Spence to don't get the 25 million a pop, for that big fight. But Spence is under contract with Al Heyman. So
yeah, that's the thing. Like, I don't think you can discredit Spence so much for telling Crawford, like, oh, you know what, that sounds good, but let me talk to Al first. Crawford has no promoter anymore. If he was still with Bob Arum, Crawford would have to do the same thing and talk to Top Rank.
Yep.
So Crawford has has the leeway because he's a free agent essentially. But Spence, even if he wanted to, if he would have to talk to Al Heyman first to get him on board. Because if Spence proceeded, you don't think Al Heyman and PBC would sue him for, disobeying his contractual obligations? I mean, I think that's kind of an unfair criticism to Spence, because Terrence Crawford was at that point under with Top Rank, and it probably would have been the same situation.
I mean, I know it's all, hype. I mean, it's just stuff that Crawford's put out there, but if that hedge fund's thought that $50 million for Crawford and Spence is going to turn a profit, then those guys are absolutely insane. You don't get heavyweight fights that don't turn a profit for that.
No, right. But I think this is more these hedge funds or people, especially like if it is this BLK Prime streaming service, it's their way how DAZN kind of jumped into the bandwagon, into the sport, spending a lot of money. You're not going to spend this type of money, essentially, if you're not going to want to stay long-term in this fight game and try to lure bigger fighters, more reputable fighters with a bigger profile to your broadcast streaming service or whatever, right? I mean, and if you show, that's kind of like a commercial, right? Oh, look, we paid these guys $25 million a piece. There's going to be fighters out there who are going to take a second look like, hey, there's money over there. You know what? Let me listen to these guys. They reached out to my people. Let me see, because they're serious. They're spending money. That's a way of them. It's a marketing tactic. It's a commercial for them to show these bigger profile fighters that they're serious about being in this game, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Like you say, it's kind of like when Triller came, right? The first splash they did was, putting that $6 million down for the Teofimo thing, which, it didn't come to fruition. But, a lot of people were like, okay, well, who are these guys? They're throwing a lot of money around. So it's, kind of similar, like they just throw that money. They intend to lose probably money on the show, but it kind of gets their foot in the door. So, yeah, I can kind of see where you're coming from and on that. So, it looks like, that's kind of dead in the water, especially with the age of, Crawford. I think if we don't see it kind of arranged by the time, Crawford, shortly after Crawford fights Davey Avanesian, I don't think we'll probably see that fight, unfortunately, because I'm sure Spence is probably going to go up to 154, and then we may see Crawford just try to mop up the rest of the titles at 147 before he retires.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. But once again, guys, we appreciate you guys listening to this week's episode of the Last Round Podcast. We've been trying to secure a guest for the last couple of weeks, but we've been having some difficulty in finding some guests or getting around some schedules. So we apologize for that, but we're definitely we've been trying to get some new people on, but some scheduling conflicts and others have hindered us in finding a date to get them on. But we are attempting. But as we completely sign off, before we completely sign off here for this week's episode, Mike, go ahead and let them know where they can find us and follow us.
We are at The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. And be sure to join us next week. We'll be previewing Sonny Edwards, Felix Alvarado, Janabek against Denzel Bentley, Montana Love, Steve Sparks, Christian Tapia, Thomas Matisse.
So for once again, and don't forget, guys, we have merchandise available. Go to our links on Instagram and Twitter. I think on Facebook as well, possibly. It's our link tree, which has all of the links to check our stuff out to support us. We have merchandise, shirts, sweaters with Fit Warrior brand. Check us out and support us. So for once again, for my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.